The Obama administration facing new calls to change the strategy for fighting terrorism as it's still having trouble finding a way to actually say the words radical Islam. Former Senator and Vice Presidential nominee Joe Lieberman spelling out a global strategy to turn the tide. He says it all begins with going on the offensive and acknowledging we are at war with violent Islamist extremism. Then nations under attack should actually declare war on those terrorists. He says the U.S. should lead a global alliance with the goal of destroying radical Islam and use Western values as a weapon against the enemy. And Senator Joe Lieberman is my guest in studio. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Gretchen.
And it was a great article. I mean, you spell it all out, and you call it what it is. Why will this administration not do that?
I don't understand it. I had a running battle with them during the years I was in the Senate. Yes, there are there's forms of extremism that threaten us, but the one we're at war with is violent Islamist extremism. That's the force that attacked America on 9/11. That's what we in Congress authorized the president to take military action against after that. That's obviously who is responsible for the three murders, that is the three attacks in France last week. So, you go back all the way to the Chinese philosopher of war, strategist Sun Tzu, and he said, the first thing you got to do when you're at war is know your enemy and call your enemy what it is.
Exactly.
This is not violent extremism. This is violent Islamist extremism.
So how do we combat it if this administration will not call it what it is, even after these attacks in Paris?
Well, that's the purpose of the piece I wrote for the Wall Street Journal today, and because I think things may have changed in Europe, our closest allies in the world, after the attacks last week. And what I'm saying is, yes, we're all Charlie now, Charlie Hebdo, but are we willing to do what's necessary to make sure that no more cartoonists or writers or artists are killed because of what they depict?
What do we need to do then, in your mind?
What we need to do is first acknowledge that the violent Islamist extremists declared war on us, frankly, a long time ago. And we have not declared war on them. We respond to episodes, to attacks like last week's, and then we recede. This is a world war. They're everywhere in the world. And I'm saying the United States should lead an international alliance that is broad, that includes some Arab and Muslim countries, that sets as its goal something very direct: destroy the Islamists. Listen to Catherine Herridge's report. We ought to be destroying those training camps in Yemen. We ought to actually not be weakly taking on ISIS in Syria and Iraq. We ought to be destroying them. That's the way it ends.
You brought up a great word, lead. So the administration admitting that it made a mistake in not sending higher officials to France, but now many suggesting it could have been a deliberate decision. Do you think it was a deliberate decision so that they would not call more attention to something they don't want to talk about?
I don't know, but I sure hope not. Frankly, either way, it was a terribly mistaken decision. I mean, first off, we should have been there. Somebody high up in this administration should have been there, and so the administration was right to acknowledge the mistake. Wow, look, if they sent somebody there, it wouldn't have added to the attention the world gave, because the murder of cartoonists, policewomen, Jews, the latter two, really all of them, just because they were who they were, drew the attention of the world. And now it's got to draw action. That's what I'm saying. All
right. Well, speaking of action, former President Jimmy Carter has gone on the record basically blaming Israel for violent extremist Islamists. He said Muslim anger over the festering Israeli-Palestinian conflict is one of the contributing causes of this kind of Islamist terrorism. And what would you say to that?
Well, I mean, it's a classic of, I'm shocked by it, of course. It's a classic one of blaming the victim. In other words, the Israelis have been victims of violent Islamist extremism, whether it's coming from Hamas or Hezbollah. But the second is to just, I think, pose this question. If magically today the Israelis and Palestinians achieved a peace agreement between them, does anyone think that the violent Islamist extremists would go away?
Great question.
They have the goal of conquering large areas, and so incidentally does Iran. So that's certainly not in any rational way the cause of the enemy we face today. Violent Islamist extremism, as serious and dangerous an enemy as the fascists and the communists that we faced in the last century.
Well said. I encourage everyone to check out what you wrote in the Wall Street Journal today. Senator, great to see you
Thanks, Gretchen.
in studio.
Great to be with you.